Thank you for joining us for today's session. We're here to talk about unemployed and unemployable, which ties in very strongly to our general theme of the conference around inclusive growth. We'll be looking at this very rather serious challenge, to put it mildly. On one side of the equation, the sub-Saharan African economy is only creating about 3 million jobs a year, while more than 10 million young people are ready to enter the workforce every year, which begs the question of how we're going to deal with the supply of jobs and the supply of income-generating opportunities if it's not formal jobs. On the other side of the coin, the said young people entering the workforce are coming in relatively unprepared with inadequate knowledge and a mismatch of skills that industry actually requires for them to perform. The Forum's Human Capital Index finds that only 55% of Africa's human potential is actually captured, which is lower than the global average of 65%. Making the situation even harder is the advent of the fourth industrial revolution, automation, outsourcing, putting a great deal of pressure on the economy. So this brings us to the question of how government and business leaders can counter this trend and foster skills and growth and job creation to address the unemployed and unemployable. Now that I've framed that question, the rest of the session will really focus on solutions, and I have the great privilege of leaving that to my esteemed panelists. First, I have Minister Jeff Radebe, Minister in the Presidency of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation in South Africa, Dr. Jennifer Blanke, Vice President of Agriculture, Human Resources and Social Development at the African Development Bank, Nicolaas Kruger, CEO of MMI South Africa, Susan Mboya, Coca-Cola Foundation, and lastly, Hamilton Ratshefola, Country Manager of IBM in South Africa. Mr. Kruger, I'd love to start with you. Since you're leading quite a large organization in MMI, 18,000 people, and you're possibly seeing a huge impact of the fourth industrial revolution, how do you read the situation and how are you responding to that?
Yeah, thank you very much. MMI is the holding company of an insurance-based financial services group. We operate in 12 countries in Africa, outside South Africa. We have about 18,000 employees. And we're also grappling with the impact of the fourth industrial revolution. What we know is that the skills base we have today and the skills we require in future to be competitive is going to be vastly, vastly different. So in fact, we've requested our executive team, in particular the head of human capital, to help us with the thinking process. What are the skills that we're going to require in future? And clearly the STEM and ICT skills, those will be in high demand, the left brain skills. But what's very important, the right brain skills will also become very important. Because although you automate things, the ability to connect with customers and also the ability to work in cross-functional teams, the ability to collaborate with your colleagues, the ability to work across different disciplines. Those are unique concepts, flatter organizational structures. So we're really rethinking organizational design, how should that work, how should we think about that, so that's work that's underway. A couple of other initiatives. It's great to join forces with your fellow insurance companies in the industry, at an industry level, do things together through the foundations. We're collaborating with Business Leadership South Africa and so forth, so that's very important. Then we also, through our own foundation, we spend about 35 million rands per annum on CSI, and about 60% of that we spend on education. And in fact, we're going to rethink that percentage and might well increase that in future, because clearly education is the foundation of a reskilling of people and changing skills. And clearly people have to not stop learning once they have certain qualifications. It's really a lifelong exercise, to keep on training and retraining yourself. To us, enhancing financial wellness of people and our clients is very, very important. So many of our activities are focusing on, really giving clients and our staff the skills to enhance financial wellness. We really ask them, have you got a budget? Have you got a financial plan? So financial literacy programs is really at the core of our purpose as a group to enhance the financial wellness. What we also do clearly is very important to innovate and to then think what skills do you require when you innovate. So we create a separate disruptive innovation unit where we partner with fintechs And by the way, that's a great way to access different skills or skills of people that don't want to work in big organizations, and we make our client base available and in that way help them to create sustainable businesses, and we also, through our Disruptive Innovation Unit, sponsoring the Chimologong precinct that Wits started, really creating an environment where entrepreneurs receive mentorships and training and so forth. So clearly, entrepreneurial skills also very important. I said we operate in 12 countries across Africa, so global mobility is very important. We constantly have the debates at Exco. What is the combination between, I guess, people from head office or from home, to really instill your culture, but then also to have local talent that really embrace the local dynamics, that you don't come with your South Africa perspective, but that you really embrace local dynamics. And I guess we find that I guess you certainly need a combination, and often it's great to have the CEOs being local people, but then some other key support roles maybe from head office until the knowledge transfer has taken place. And then maybe my last comment, in some areas of the group where we've consolidated businesses and ended up with excess capacity, we've created redeployment centers. And recently in one of our business, we had excess capacity of 200 people where we retrained them and then redeployed them throughout the group in different roles, and we ended up with something like 19 redundancies only. So I think that's a great, it's a great initiative.
Thank you so much for that. Let me also move to you, Hamilton. You are also on the supply side, being a large organization, but with your special focus on ICT, you're in a very good position to tell us around the impact of digital skills and how you're also developing some of that. Please do share your perspective.
Yeah, we attack the problem. Thank you, Rapelang. We attack the problem from a number of areas. We saw a gap between a student who leaves school, grade 10, a graduate who finished university. They are all not ready, most of them, for jobs. So you still have to bring them closer to the technology of that moment for them to be effective. So that's one part. The other part, we also realized that we managed to convince IBM to bring the research laboratories here in South Africa and Kenya, and to be able to help, because we have research all over the world, but we don't have scientists who actually can work with real problems, solve problems here. So we open a research in partnership with Wits and deploy a research lab. We have about 20 researchers and scientists working to solve issues in medical, in cancer, in SKA, in new programs that the South African government is looking at driving. So that's what we've done at a local level. But our biggest challenge is we have new technologies, blockchain, artificial intelligence. We have Internet of Things that require skills and talent, and you're not going to get that from anywhere. We decided to build an academy initially over the past 2 years, training about 100 graduates every quarter, and deploying them successfully into companies, both as IBM employees or hired by other companies. And we realized that is not going to, it's only solving a small problem. So we sat with the CEO of IBM, General Meti, and she made a donation of $70 million of an IBM computing platform to Africa, which today any country, any school can log on and experience blockchain, experience development, and experience artificial intelligence, the latest development tools. Now, we've actually partnered with the Department of Education South Africa, which probably will announce soon, where we said, why should a learner who come out of the South African institution, a schooling system, end up in matric and having done IT, but can't code? With this program, we're able to get grade 10s, 11, 12s to start coding at an early age of grade 10, 12. So as if there is no job, if there is no university, they can self-employ, they can start up their own businesses. So we believe the way to attack this is to be able to provide technology free, we've done that, to the kids. The technology is running on the same WhatsApp platform that you use, so they can access it. And we're just partnering with governments, in South Africa, across Africa, in Nigeria, everywhere, to make sure Africa in the next 5 years, we can at least develop competent, skilled people, 25 million of them, in technology and digital skills. So that some can use, some can be innovators, and some can do startups. So it's a real program of trying to see how we can empower and move, and all the kids who participate all in this program called DNA, Digital Nation Africa, when they finish a module or whatever they can, we guarantee them that we can employ them. They are employable and they can be productive from day one. Because out of the 400 people we've been training using the same technology, they are effective from day one and can work for banks, insurance, retailers, and we believe that's the way to go of solving the skills gap. Now, fees must fall. Kids who can't go to school can use the technology. For universities, we've put special program like artificial intelligence. The new world is cognitive computing, ability for you to infuse intelligence in your business processes. And that's what we are doing in the new world. And for us, from unemployed to employed, if we participate in this program, you get skills that actually can get you the employment level. Okay.
Thank you very much for that contribution. Susan, I'd like to turn to you. You are creating opportunities in a different way through Coca-Cola's initiatives. I know you've already been popular for 5 by 20, but I know you're doing a lot of other things now to empower young people. Please do share some of that.
Sure. Thanks for that. And I think we're all very familiar with sort of the dire statistics that say, you know, there's 11 million youth coming into the market, the job market every year, and you know we can only produce half the number of jobs. But the other thing that we have to take into account is that the very nature of the job market is changing. It's not what it used to be. You know, before it was very binary. You either had people who were unemployed or they had a job. You know, now with the way that this younger generation works, you know, they tend to do multiple things at the same time. You know, what we call mixed livelihoods. You know, they don't necessarily want to focus on one particular job. They want the opportunity to do many different things. And with the Youth Empowered, the Youth Empowered for Success program, which is the program that the Coca-Cola Africa Foundation has started, you know, as we did research, we realized that almost all of them are working in some way, shape or form. You know, it may be in the family business, you know, it may be helping back in the village, but they're all sort of earning an income here or there. And so as we developed the program, we really made a conscious effort to develop it for this particular demographic and for this, for the trends that we were seeing. One of the other things we were kind of surprised to realize is that although access to jobs was a key pillar of the program, many of the youth who came into the program said, I don't want to be employed. Actually, more than 75% of them were very clear that they wanted to work, but they did not want to be employed. And so, you know, the first pillar of the program, or rather the first key thing I would say is, you know, as we develop youth empowerment programs, ensuring that those programs are relevant. And what do I mean by that? Rather than focusing on getting youth ready for a particular trade, really focus more on transferable skills, on skills that will enable them to start their own business, things like, you know, ensuring that they're able to develop their own business plans, for example, present those business plans, understand, do their own market analysis, and understand the viability of the ideas that they have. We also, you know, the second piece is around accessibility. You know, the youth that we're trying to reach the youth who are the most marginalized and who tend to have the least access to job opportunities. And you know, what has happened historically is, as young people graduate, they migrate to look for jobs. We said we want to flip that and say, how do we take the jobs to where they are? Well, you know, Coca-Cola is probably, we're accused anyway, of being one of the most pervasive brands. We are everywhere. And so we said, how do we use that? The fact that our brands we have a presence in rural areas, we have a presence in hard to reach areas. And what we did is we created what we call hubs, areas where young people can come and congregate, and where we can provide these youth empowerment services. So they get, and it could be a shop, it could be a hall, it could be somebody's home, where we provide access to business skills training. We've also provided trainers who can help them mentoring as well, access to finance. And very key in this as well is we've introduced an element of technology so that they're actually able to access all of these services, not just at the hub, but even when they go home. The third piece of this is around scale. For us, for a youth empowerment program to be effective, we really do need to be able to reach, not just sort of the youth in the urban areas, but to be able to take this, and we're looking at this across 6 countries in Africa. And sorry, the fourth element is around sustainability. And I think, as we look at the way that Coca-Cola has worked historically, we recognize that in the private sector, there are certain elements that we can bring to the program. But to make the program sustainable, we need to also be working with the community. We also need to be working with government. And in what we call the golden triangle, which is government, the NGOs, and the private sector. And so we've also worked with other private sector companies to open up our value chains and to create jobs within our value chains for young people. To date, we've been able to engage about 9,500 youth with over 7,000 completing training. And so I think this is, we're still on our journey with this, but I think we're very excited about the progress that we've made and the possibilities going forward.
Great, thank you. So I think we've heard from the few private sector players around the kind of skills that they're building in young people that are quite different from what was required before, right? Brain thinking skills, big picture thinking skills, teamwork, collaboration, communication. Jennifer, you're in a position to sort of look at both sides of the equation, on the supply side, demand side, and the skills sort of development side. So can you tell us a bit more from the African Development Bank perspective, how you're trying to pull it all together so that everyone's talking?
Yeah, thanks. So, what we're trying to do is, well, I'd say there's 2 things. Look at both the supply and the demand side and also the linkages between them, but ensure that you have the public and private sectors talking to each other as much as possible, because it's wonderful when the private sector is doing things. It's great when the public sector is doing them, but if they're not doing it together, you just don't have as much impact. So maybe I'll just very quickly talk about what we're doing on the supply side, and then a bit more on the demand side, which I think is probably more relevant for this discussion. So on the supply side, we engage a lot with governments, and so we have many conversations with them in terms of technical assistance. We have many experts who work in the bank who are looking, both at the policy side of things. So, ensuring you have the right kinds of policies in place that allow for, very strong and adaptive educational systems, but also making sure that you protect the budgets and you don't cut critical spending on education or vocational training and things like that. And so that's one thing. But also bringing in, a strong look at how they're running the educational systems in order to make sure that they're getting value for money. And finally, of course, looking at the curricula. And they're never on our own. There, it's critical to bring in the private sector because, although nobody has a crystal ball as to where everything is going, particularly with this 4th industrial revolution, the private sector has a better sense, and so it's important for them to be involved. At least they know what the situation is now. And so I think all of that is what we're doing there. Another area I would just mention that was sort of touched on is the fact that we're really pushing in the direction of technology, innovation, science, everything around STEM, just to make sure that African countries are really taking these areas seriously. We know that the problem right now is that we have a lot of graduates that are studying important things, but not necessarily what's needed by the economy or the labor market. So that's on the supply side. On the demand side, we have a new big initiative that we're quite excited about called Jobs for Youth Africa. And that is really a bank-wide effort where we're crowding in efforts from a lot of other foundations and other actors who are interested in this area. And it has many different elements, but I'll mention, sort of two that I think are interesting and that haven't been mentioned yet. The first is the whole idea that if you think about what a multilateral development, a development institution in general does, we have lots of projects, right? We do lots of things, whether it's infrastructure or in agriculture. So what we're doing is we're making sure that anything we do has an employment element to it. Right, so we're training the staff of the bank to make sure that as they build out projects, whether it's building a new bridge or working on a port or building a new hospital, that they think about the vocational training as well as the jobs. So that we're trying to create actually over the next 10 years in this and other ways about 25 million new jobs. And really trying to get, sort of better skills to about 50 million young people directly through this project. So really that's about the mainstreaming. Everything we do, we'll try to improve job creation and also track it afterwards. So it's going to be in the KPIs of the project managers, the operations managers at the bank. Another thing I would mention, we're definitely looking at things like IT. We're doing sort of sector efforts in areas where we think it's important to drive employment creation. One that hasn't been mentioned here is agriculture. I'm VP for agriculture and a few other things at the bank. And this is an area we're very excited about. We started a new program last year called Enable Youth. And there what we're doing is we're taking the young graduates coming just out of school, it doesn't matter what they studied, and we're getting them excited about agriculture as a business. Not agriculture as a way of life, agriculture as a business. And we give them training, we put them in touch with other entrepreneurs, teach them about value chains, give them even seed funding, loans, et cetera. And really get them excited about this. And we actually even have our annual meeting at the end of the month in India, and we have a session on the program called Agriculture is Cool. Because we really want young people to think that this is an area that's quite interesting to get into. Again, not necessarily to be smallholder farmers, although that's important, but really to figure out how do you move up the value chain, because that's where the jobs are going to be. And so I'd say these are two of the pieces that we're working on. We're also doing lots of other funding schemes, and we're working in industrial jobs and IT jobs and things like that. But these are some of the sort of, I think, more exciting ones that people aren't necessarily thinking about. And I'd say, just to wrap up, through all of this, we need to have the government fully engaged. You need to have the right policy environment. You also really need the private sector involved as well, and well coordinated. And we're really going to keep trying to push through. And anybody who's interested in working on that, I think we need to be working together and rowing in the same direction. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much. Minister Radebe, you've heard from Jennifer that government being involved is quite critical in this process, and I know you take that role quite clearly with your Agenda 2063. Please do share some of those insights.
Well, thanks for inviting me, and good afternoon to my fellow panelists as well. I think the starting point is Agenda 2063, which envisions an Africa that is on the march towards a more prosperous Africa. And I think we need to underline this point, that the responsibility for doing all this, to march on this bold vision, is the responsibility for all of us, government, business, labor, citizens alike. And that future of Africa is also dependent on a well-developed generation of young people. The statistics shows that Africa is growing. In 2015, there were about 1.5 million, 1.3 million Africans, and by 2063, there will be almost 53 billion people on the continent. So this agenda, therefore, that's why even this year, our heads of states dedicated 2017 to be the year of harnessing this demographic dividend through investment in young people. So it is our responsibility, therefore, that we should leave no stone unturned in empowering young people of this great continent, because the current demographic structure with a high youthful population in our country will lend significant potential to the economic transformation of the African continent. And also too, at the World Economic Forum in Kigali last year, it was decided that our focus should be on a future-oriented subject such as science, as Mr. Kruger has indicated, technology, engineering, as well as mathematics, and also ICT, which is very critical for the development of the African continent. I also want to highlight the point as well that partnerships and collaboration between the public and private sectors, civil society on this educational sector is very critical to imparting the skills for the youth of this continent of ours. The other point that has to be emphasized is the whole issue of the fourth industrial revolution. The fourth industrial revolution, as it was heavily discussed at the World Economic Forum in Davos this year, we should also understand that as Africa, we should not be left behind this industrial revolution, because living through this time in the world today, ideas are more important than many other things. So technology is a major factor and opportunity that we need all of us to leverage upon. Especially the knowledge economy, where in many parts of Africa, there are still jobs that do not exist in other parts of the world because of this industrial revolution that is taking place in our country. But part of the things that we would like to propose, some of the key actions and deliverables that maybe this forum needs to consider, that we need to develop strategies that are aimed at reducing the proportion of young people that are unemployed, because as we know that by at least a quarter by year 2024, in accordance with this Agenda 2063. And secondly, also to improve access to credit facilities, especially for young people, especially entrepreneurs. And also to engage all chief executive officers in the private sector, philanthropies, in making sure that we develop these entrepreneurial skills amongst our people to capacitate young people. And also to invest with high job multiplier effect sectors such as information and communications technology, agriculture, the point that Jennifer has raised, in order to ensure that we increase that generation of employed young people in our country.
Thank you for that. I think knowing how big this challenge is around unemployment and skills, what further role do you see a government playing in terms of coordinating everything? So we've heard, for example, that there are young people that are educated, but they're educated in the wrong things, and they therefore won't get employed. Who is really supposed to take on the role of helping us prioritize the skills, and do we ever get to a point where we can plan for 5 or 10 years how many people we want to develop in different industries, so that we don't get to a situation where we're trying to absorb them sort of at the end? And how can we sort of better plan that from a government perspective and bringing in the stakeholders?
Well, I think the first point to be highlighted is that the responsibility of doing all these things does not lie with government only. So we require that partnership with business, with labor. Fortunately, here in South Africa, we have this National Development Plan, our Vision 2030. But I think what is critical as well is to ensure that when we provide that education and skills development, it must match the jobs that are required by the industry. So that collaboration is of critical importance in order to ensure that we can be able to deliver the goods that we require. So there are various initiatives of government working with the private sector and labor to harness these kinds of things.
Jennifer, how can we contribute to that?
Yeah, I mean, I would completely agree with the minister that it is not only in the purview of the government. And I did say, I mean, I said before, but just very briefly, that, you know, the private sector doesn't have a crystal ball, but they have a better idea of where we are now. You know, it's sort of like, you know what the weather's doing now. And so I think, you know, it is that sort of dance between the private and the public sector, as well as institutions that work on this, as well as educational institutions, obviously. But I just want to make a point, because I think we often look at this and we kind of tear our hair out in Africa and we say, oh my gosh, this is such a huge challenge. And yet recognizing the fact that advanced economies are really struggling with this, because they have so much legacy infrastructure in terms of the educational system to change. I work a lot with the Canadian government, and they're having to complete, because they recognize that the jobs of tomorrow are not the same as the jobs of today, and their educational system is still actually preparing people for the jobs of yesterday, not even today. And so I think we also have to get a little bit more positive in Africa about the fact that, the fact that we're starting, and I'm not saying that there's nothing, there's some very, very good work that's already been done, there's some very good schools, I mean, a lot, but the fact that there's a bit less infrastructure in place means that there's less legacy, and it's really sort of a carpe diem moment to say we can really do this, and we don't have to throw off so much of the past, and we can really move forward looking forward. But that really does require a multi-stakeholder, not to speak, the forums speak, but it's true, really multi-stakeholder approach.
How do we surface some of the data? Because my worry sometimes is that there is a lot of things going on, but public sector doesn't have sight into what private sector sees and vice versa, and we're all looking at different data sets in terms of what skills exist, what job opportunities will exist in 5 years. How do we bridge that data gap, essentially?
I mean, it's a pain, because if you take the tech world, it's moving so fast. 2 years ago, we are not in artificial intelligence. Now it's fully blown AI. We're talking IoT, but now we're here. If you look at things that are moving so rapidly, and the challenge we have is that the student we're getting from university is not taught, and the curriculum is not aligned. But I want to make a point probably that can help us. There is a new collar job, and this new collar job for us is not a graduate. It's a digitally skilled individual who might not have been to university, might have finished high school, but do cybersecurity, can hack, can do application development, can build apps, and therefore we are paranoid and obsessed with people going to university when we can actually do new collar jobs and train people to be available for the new jobs. For example, while I'm hiring 100 people, not all of them are graduates. Some of them are very good guys with matric and maths. We are able to train them and get them to be effective in these new collar jobs. So for us to solve the problem, we've got to be able to mix it up. We need, of course, guys to go into PhDs and be scientists, but we need to also take the masses and be able to train them in areas where the skills are required. For example, we need a lot of developers in Africa. We can't keep outsourcing work to India. I mean, we've got to bring work here, and we have the capacity, but we're not training enough in the right areas. So for us, it's about looking at the gaps we have. When I took over IBM, I look at the gaps. Everybody used to say no skills. I decided we're going to go to schools, we're going to hire matriculants, we're going to hire some graduates, we're going to mix it up together. We're producing today top-class digital skills that are able to address issues in the modern economy. And I believe if we do that pervasively, and that's why the donation of a digital platform to Africa is really a breakthrough, that each country, you don't have to ask IBM. You just go DNA Africa, you'll be able to log on. We believe that grade 10s, if grade 10s, 11 and 12 in South Africa, for example, can be trained in just Java or whatever development language. By the time they finish school, they can decide not to go to work. They already can have skills to go into the employment and create their own businesses. And that's what we're going to do for Change Africa. Okay.
Thank you. I think you raised some interesting questions around how involved private sector should be in almost specifying the curriculum or what is actually studied in detail. I don't know if, Nicolaas, from your perspective in financial services, you feel that that could actually help with that deeper engagement with universities or colleges or wherever the training happens, that you're more involved in sort of curriculum specification.
Yeah, I agree with some of the previous speakers that the private sector is really very much in touch with what are the skills requirements. And we need to be proactive and engage with not only universities but schools as well, to get the foundation right and to identify the people with the STEM skills and potential ICT skills early on and make sure that we nurture them and fast track them. And I guess, as some of the other speakers have said as well, it's not only about university degrees. That's also important, but vocational training is also important. So we need to think very differently. And certainly very close partnerships, is really the way to go. We really need to form partnerships, and we as MMI have interactions and collaboration initiatives with more than one university. We're also involved with schools. I mean, a great initiative recently where we got involved is the Partners for Possibility, where you partner a principal of a school, and you mentor that principal as an equal, and certainly bring your business skills, and really mentor the principal. What are the challenges at schools? What advice have you got? You're not the boss. You almost mentor each other, and some of those relationships are really very, very deep relationships that really transform the schools. And the business colleagues that do the mentorship, they also gain a lot from a personal perspective. So that's, I guess, one example at school level. So this is really the way to go.
Sure. Susan, I want to come back to you with some of your programs. I think everyone has spoken a great deal about the kind of skills and training that we're doing. Often when we're trying to create those economic opportunities like your programs are, my question as an entrepreneur is that, will there be enough pipeline? And how do we support the pipeline of opportunities after creating these skills for young people?
I think that the answer is yes. There will be a pipeline, and I think we had heard earlier. You need to look at both the supply and the demand. We are at an interesting place. We have this sort of challenge and opportunity with young people. We have this abundance of young people and energy and talent, and if we are able to harness it and leverage it, I think this is, this could be a huge inflection point for us. In terms of harnessing on the supply side, young people, when you talk to employers, we've heard a lot about some of the hard skills. The biggest gap that we have is really on the soft skills, is on the job readiness skills. I often give an anecdote, which is sort of the best way to dimensionalize this. When we were doing research for the YES program, the Youth Empowered for Success program, we talked to young people in Alexandra. Met this young man sort of standing on a street corner, and we were asking them how long they'd been looking for a job, and he said, well, I had a job, but I quit. And we said, okay, so why did you quit? And he says, well, he's university educated. He said, I went to work for an ad agency. But one day I came in and they said, oh, you know what, you need to go home and wear a suit because we've got a client. And he said, I told them I wasn't going to wear a suit to work. And he quit. And for me, that really sort of epitomizes the problem and why a lot of employers find it risky to bring in young people. So as we think about how we create the market, how we create this workforce, the soft skills, that enable them to come into the workforce and succeed from day one. Mentoring is going to be key to that. For many of them who are entrepreneurs or who are looking to be entrepreneurs and are going to be looking for financing, how to present themselves in a situation like that. On the demand side, we've talked about the size of this population. 195 million of them today. Projected to be 395 million by 2050. That's a huge market. And so one of the things we're looking at with our program is how do we create a kind of a marketplace where they become their own market. Because it's one thing to create all these skills and jobs and services, but who do they sell to? Exactly. And I know I'm generalizing here, but in Africa we tend to look outside the continent as, success is when I can get business outside the continent. How do we create a mindset that says, no, the market is right here, and have our own young people not just creating the jobs, but actually leveraging the services and jobs, the goods and services that they're creating.
I
Great.
just want to emphasize the point that Kruger made about this collaboration between schools, the private sector, especially on these critical skills. There are very staggering statistics that show that 60% of the children who are at primary schools this year, 2017, will be in jobs that do not exist at the moment. So which means that that collaboration between government and the private sector is of critical importance. Even the curriculum cannot just be decided by government alone. There has to be a sit-down meeting planning for the long term in order to ensure that the future of the children is guaranteed here in Africa.
You've heard from our panelists, and I'd love to open up the floor for you to challenge them with some questions. Please do raise your hand. We have some roving mics, and we'll take about 3 questions, or 3 or 4 questions, before we continue with the answers. Any questions? I think there's one. The lady in the front. Oh, okay.
Thank you. Hi. I'm Janet Longmore with Digital Opportunity Trust, and I was really pleased to hear, Susan, your comments of the research that you did with young people. Just one comment, there are no young people on the panel. And yet it's a growing demographic, and really they will be the marketplace. So I'm curious to hear from all of you, or from anyone specifically, more about how you envision engaging with young people in terms of their ideas for driving the future of work, the skills, because they are really, they are creating that now and into the future. So love to hear more.
Thank you. Engaging young people. Any other questions?
Is it on? Okay. My question is just to know the business readiness to give internship for young people. I think we talked about job readiness of young people. Unless the business actually open the door and allow young people to learn the soft skills and have a job experience, their preparedness to really stay in a job and also begin their life is difficult. So my question is how businesses are ready.
Great. There were also a couple this side, but.
Thank you. I believe this one is for Minister Radebe. Minister, I guess when one comes to the World Economic Forum event and listen to the skills discussions, and we try and reconcile it to how we, how we actually practically prepare ourselves for the future. It's a difficult one. So I mean, I guess we know that a lot of the jobs, a lot of the jobs that our children will be doing in 20 years' time, we understand that they don't exist, so therefore we need to teach them to learn and keep on learning. But we also know, Minister, that, I mean, in South Africa we sit with a high unemployment rate. And if we actually really adopt a lot of the technologies that the rest of the world is using, that that immediately will increase the level of unemployment. So how do we actively do this, Minister? And maybe the point has been made about the panel maybe not being young enough, but I thought this one I'll direct to you, that how do we get into our government a lot of young people, and how do we start being seen to really be preparing for a new world?
I don't think we'll do another round, so one more question and then we'll have the panelists answer.
Thank you very much. I was thinking of how to link the government and business to make education relevant, to make sure that the young achieve the right skills for jobs. And I think it is here in South Africa where the National Qualification Framework, I come from education background, by the way. National Qualification Framework was implemented, I guess, first time in Africa and also in the world, where in curriculum development, that first the labor market is studied, and then appropriate types of competence are identified, and then the business community is involved in ensuring that the competencies identified are relevant to the market needs. And also, education and training institutions are well prepared before they start receiving students for training, and also to make sure that graduates have the right competences. So I thought that in South Africa there are institutions that are making sure there are relevant competences, education in training institutions are prepared, and graduates have the right competences. Don't you think such kind of institutions would fill the gap of creating the collaboration between business and government?
Great, thank you for those questions. Does any of the panelists want to jump up to start the first round? Sure, Susan, go ahead.
I can take maybe the first question, which is really about how do we engage young people. And I think for the YES program, I mean, I'd love to say that this was all our idea, but the program has evolved significantly, and it's evolved driven by the needs and the insights from young people. So an example of that, the hubs that I talked about, that came from young people. They didn't want a classroom setting. They were very clear. And they didn't want to sit in a room the whole day. They wanted to be able, so our program training has been changed. It's now very modular, so they can come and sort of pick and choose what they want to do. They can train as they feel they need it. We've had people who have said, I have a job interview coming up tomorrow. I'd like to learn about how to interview. So I think that's key. And then in terms of the job readiness and business readiness, our readiness to take in young people, again, I think we really have to be driven by what the market reality is today. And if we don't change, and I think all of us in the corporate world are starting to realize that if we don't change, we will not be able to maintain the kind of talent that we have. Being able to have the kind of flexibility that young people not just require but demand these days. Those are all things that, as a company, we need to be thinking about. Fortunately, one of the things we're also realizing is that those changes tend to work for everybody. So when you do have flexible work hours, it's not just something that is special for young people. It's something that drives productivity across the board. So I think long answers say listen to them.
Jennifer, I know you want to jump in.
Yeah. I think we probably all think we're pretty young still, at least we're children at heart. 50's the new 30 and all that kind of thing. Although I think our moderator does actually qualify still as young. No, but all kidding aside, I actually kind of almost had to think twice about what you said, because we would not do any of what we're doing unless we were engaging young people. And they're engaged in every step of the process. We even had a great agripreneurs pitching session in Nigeria, in Ibadan, last week. Where again we had a feedback loop, and the learning from that was, not that I think it's earth-shattering, but the women that were there need more training in pitching. They have great ideas. So, and then that's like an ongoing, and we don't want to wait until they're 23. How do we actually get them when they're younger, And so I think that it's becoming part of the DNA, actually, of people working on these things, that you can't do these without actually integrating young people. And then I think there was another question on business readiness. To hire people, this is a mindset issue in particular, and I think it would be interesting to hear the perspective from from all of the three companies actually, because I think often, and this is true everywhere, there's that sense that if we stump up the cash to do the training, but then they're going to be stolen by someone else. But I think that mindset is changing. I think it's starting to change. So I'd be interested to hear actually how they're approaching that, because it's something that we know is a challenge. And yet it's got to be part of the solution as well.
Okay.
Right, sure.
Yeah, I think from my side, I always look at my background. Hired by IBM as a youngster coming out of university. I'm absolutely not business ready. And my degree and the work I was going to do, totally far apart. Have to develop me from scratch. And out of 60 of us, they end up with, after 3 years training, end up with only 20. 40 were stolen or poached by other people. Now, the philosophy of working is you continue to build. I hire 100 graduates every quarter, And I'm sure by 3 years from now, my competitors will easily help themselves with half of them. But I've got to keep building. I can't worry about the loss I have. I've got to keep looking at the business requirements and looking forward and building capacity. So it's very interesting that it's multinationals who build capacity quite often, who train, who develop. Local companies don't invest a lot. Maybe what Nicolaas saying we invest. But I look back when I started, it was multinationals, IBM, who hired lots of black guys and trained them. So for me, we respect companies that continue over the years to continue to focus on building talent. Okay, but let's go to a question which I like to address of more technology means less jobs. I differ. We'll increase our staff from currently 2,000 to more, probably 3,000, 4,000 because of new technology. In terms of hiring them in data science, we need new jobs called data scientists. So we need cybersecurity specialists. We need artificial intelligence people who can do work. So, and we need developers, lots and lots of developers. We can never have enough. So the question is, where are the youngsters who can go into these fields? And if they don't have maths, they can't feature. So our challenge is also get our kids, or most of the guys who qualify, come from high school. That's why it's important for the government to emphasize mathematics, because you can be able to do a lot more with math student if you don't, rather than non-math students. So for me, technology is not going to kill people. It's not going to take jobs. It's going to create more jobs and more opportunities, higher value jobs where people get paid better versus labor wages. So that what you pay in the old. So for me, I'm really saying, answering you, technology provides new opportunities and vast opportunities. I'll give you an example. We have a center which takes work from Europe because we have a team that specializes in supporting a certain technology. So we outsource work from Europe to here in South Africa, in Randburg. And we have about 500 people just doing that. They speak Spanish, but they have learned the technology, French, Dutch, in order for us to support work offshore. So for us, you can train people and you can develop them to be able to be effective. So I don't agree with technologies take jobs. Technology creates new opportunities. Okay.
Yes, just a couple of comments from me. Comments around young people are absolutely important. We need to understand the behavior and the needs of the millennials. And in the same way as we segment our client bases and have different approaches, we have to have different approaches to manage different generations. The millennials will have to be managed very, very differently. I mean, I've been with one organization for 26 years. Certainly the millennials will not be that loyal. They've got a totally different view of the world. So and are businesses ready? I think businesses have to change tremendously, to be able to be, a great place to work for these youngsters. And also, I guess, around the question, are businesses ready to recruit unemployed people and to retrain them or to upskill them? That requires a change in mindset. And I guess bigger organizations have an increased responsibility to play a role in society as well. So in South Africa, we've had an ongoing discussions between various business leaders to create 1 million jobs. And you can think of all kinds of excuses not to, take in people, but you have to play the role in society. So, I mean, we have one initiative where we take in, say, 40 unemployed people and to train them into salespeople. And we hope to then recruit 70 to 80% of that. But that's a big effort and it requires a mindset change. But if we don't start that, we won't be successful. Maybe that's the last comment. I fully agree with your statements around impact of technology on jobs. And I guess we need to participate in the fourth industrial revolution from an Africa perspective. So we have to embrace these new skills. Certainly, some of the roles will be disrupted. Some job families, like administrative roles, will disappear in future in some places. but new jobs will be created around, other technologies. Very interesting, just a last comment, is the work that the World Economic Forum has been doing around Africa's skills, and so that's very, very insightful, and one must go and have a look. And what's very interesting, they plot the Africa countries and say, well, are they ready to adapt for these changes? And unfortunately, most African countries are below average, from a capability to adapt perspective. The other perspective that the World Economic Forum has also highlighted is that quite a few economies in Africa will not be disrupted that significantly by the fourth industrial revolution in the short term. Unfortunately, South Africa is not in that category. South Africa will be disrupted quite a bit, because ICT skills play a tremendous role in the economy and so forth. So South Africa has to lift its game because it will be disrupted quite a lot. And in fact, South Africa is slightly below average from a capacity to adapt perspective. So we really, I guess, have to embrace the fourth industrial revolution. And I guess on balance, hopefully we'll create more jobs than the number of jobs that will be displaced.
Great. Do you have a final comments? Yes.
My final comments on the questions, engaging with young people. In South Africa, we have a body called the National Youth Development Agency that was specifically established in order to attend to the challenges of young people, especially education, and also to assist them in terms of getting into businesses. About 3 weeks ago, for an example, I had an engagement with young people. These are entrepreneurs, innovators, academics. I was so pleasantly surprised about the quality that young people, their innovation, they even invent things. But one of their major challenges, they say, is support, financial support from government. Minister of Science and Technology is in the room. We have a target in this first 5 year of implementing the National Development Plan from 2014 to 2019 to invest about 1.5 of GDP on research, development, and innovation. But at the moment, we're at about 0.79%. So there's still a long way to go. But I'm just answering your question that we need to have more engagements with young people. On the issue of technology, I want to support my panelists. I think we should not fear technology. We should embrace it, but also look at some of its negative impact, because we cannot fight progress, we cannot fight technology. In the first industrial revolution, there was a group in England called the Luddites who were fighting, breaking down machines when the steam engine was invented, but they were fighting a losing battle. It went ahead. So I think our caution would be that, especially as Africa, let us not be left behind by this fourth industrial revolution. Let's embrace it. Let's be dedicated as adults to lifelong learning, so that we must reskill ourselves on a continuous basis, while our young people, they must be part of this fourth industrial revolution with vigor and vim.
Thank you very much. We are literally almost out of time, but I want to just ask sort of 30-second bites from the panelists in terms of, you've heard all the contributions that everyone is making in different sectors of the economy and society. Are you comforted that enough is being done for us to get past this problem? And if you are, what gives you that comfort? And if you're not comforted, what is the one thing that you'd like to see happen that you think will get us across the finish line? 30 seconds, 1 minute. Hamilton, go ahead.
Well, for me, I think the question raised by the gentleman here, the collaboration and the interworking between government and business to make sure that the jobs and curriculum that is at schools and university is relevant to produce the right kind of quality individual, whether at matric level or high school level to get a new collar job, a person at university level to produce someone who is ready to produce, to be able to be effective. But also what we shouldn't neglect is the PhD science research work that builds patents, that builds innovation, that builds long-term solution. That we should not neglect. And so for me, that is really area that I'd like to see more and more government collaboration with the private sector.
Great, Jennifer.
Actually, just following up on the collaboration idea, I think we've seen, well, I mean, just on the panel, different organizations and institutions that are working a lot on this. I'm sure the room is filled with people who are working on this. And it's great. There's a lot of really great work going on. Of that, I'm convinced. And yet, are we all rowing in the same direction? And are we, sort of coming together and multiplying the work that we're doing? So what I would hope to see is that there's more collaboration in this area across organizations, whether it's across companies between each other, or across governments and across different types of institutions, so that the total impact on educational systems and employment is greater than the sum of the parts.
Thank you. Susan.
Maybe just to build on that, I think collaboration is the first step, scale is the second. And we all through today have heard fantastic ideas, but they tend to be localized, they tend to be limited, even though these are ideas that have huge potential to scale. So that would be the other push, I would say, is if you have something that works, let's really focus, that would be the next step for me, is scale.
Thank you. Nicolaas?
I agree with the previous sentiments expressed. I think great work is being done in a variety of places. But if you look at where we are today, Africa's relative skills gap is the biggest of all regions in the world. Mm-hmm. So I think we've identified the problem. There's a lot of initiatives, but we need to take it to the next level and to use the platform of the World Economic Forum to connect like-minded businesses, but also to to have these debates, but then also to fast-track collaboration between business and government and civil society. That's really required to take it to the next level, and in a couple of years' time, hopefully in 5 to 10 years' time, on a relative basis, Africa will no longer be behind.
Great.
I concur with my fellow panelists on this collaboration.
I'm sure you do.
Just to emphasize that in other countries that has been proven to be correct. If you look, for an example, in England, University of Warwick, they don't just teach students from the air. They sit down with the industry and business so that they tailor the curriculum to fit the industry. I think we need to do that in Africa as well.
Excellent. And I must end our panel session with that. Collaboration, scale, high-tech innovation, IP is some of the key words.